Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. Today we're going to specifically look at cards from the 2023 Megatins that I personally think I would pick up right now because they're likely to go up in price in the future. Now we're going to take this with a grain of salt. Overall, it looks like the tins aren't going to have as much value as expected, and it's really difficult to speculate because we do have that big ban list looming. However, the tins are still some of the most opened products of the year, and there's going to be some cards that manage to slip under the radar with the player base. There's been a ton of times over the last few years where we've talked about cards that only have their original printing and Megatin reprints, and that has led to the cards getting expensive, so we want to try and identify what those cards are going to be early on. Of course, given that these are pre-sales, we could see prices continue to go down a little bit further before they bounce back up, but of course we are looking at relatively cheap cards out of the tins in the first place, and as always, make sure that you guys do your own research and weigh your options before you decide to invest in any of these cards for yourselves. But guys, before we do get started, I do want to briefly remind everyone to go over and check out MSTmerch.com. We just launched the Pink Carbon Series sleeves, and honestly, I think they're the absolute best product that we have on the site. I've been pushing for us to get those pinks out to you guys, and I'm really glad they are finally here. However, we do also have the whites, blacks, Ulti Instinct, Ulti Ego, oversleeves. Everything else is back in stock, so make sure that you guys go ahead and check that out. And with that said, let's get into today's episode. Okay, so I don't know if I mentioned this in the intro part, but we're doing my top 5 choices for this video, and my first card is going to be Ariana the Labyrinth Servant. So a lot of you guys will know that I am pretty big on Labyrinth. I find them a lot of fun to play, and I've been running the deck for the last little while. Even before Big Welcome came out, Ariana is the Stratos for the Labyrinth deck, searching for a Labyrinth card when normal or special summoned. So I see Ariana as being a key card for Labyrinth that players will be scrambling to pick up after all of the initial opening of the tins and stuff has died down and people aren't scrambling to crack open the tins anymore. Ariana is run at 2 to 3 in the Labyrinth deck, but only has printings in Tactical Masters and now the Megatins. I think that the reason Ariana is so cheap is that Labyrinth hasn't been too crazy recently. I feel like we haven't seen much from the deck over the last several weeks, and probably struggles now because of the emergence of Unchained in the format as well. However, I think that overall, the deck is still really strong, it just kind of has to adjust, and honestly, despite being one of the better decks of the overall entire last format, I don't really see the deck getting hit outside of getting Eradicator banned. Now, some people think that losing Eradicator means that the deck just doesn't do anything anymore, but that's just not true. Furthermore, we should be getting a couple of new cards for Labyrinth with the upcoming release of Arius in Age of Overlord, and then whenever we get Transaction rollback as well. So yeah, this card is currently between $3 and $4 for pre-order right now. I do think it's going to drop a little bit more as people crack open the tins. I think that if it drops to anything under $2, this card is definitely a buy. So if you can grab them between like $2 to $3 here and there, I think this is a solid grab, as Labyrinth will likely continue to be a strong contending deck over the next couple of formats. Okay, so this is one that I feel extremely confident about. Garuda Wings of Resonant Life at $3 is an absolute steal. This card is one of the best fusion monsters ever printed in the game. It single-handedly allows Super Poly to be this absolutely absurd disruption card, but on top of that, it lets you draw a card whenever it's sent to the graveyard. This means that it can be just as valuable when used as a link material, or if you happen to dump it to the graveyard with something like Dogmatica Punishment. I personally think that at $3 this card is a buy, but at the same time, right, it's still early. I don't want you guys to buy too much into this early hype with product and just assume that the card is going to go up from here. Generally, it is more likely that the card will continue to move downward from what its pre-sale price is. To be honest though, I did think that this card's pre-sale price would be closer to $5, given how low the values of the other cards in this year's tins seem to be overall. The one thing we do have to watch out for is that we could see Super Poly get limited or banned. Super Poly is always such a difficult card to play around, and the fact that you can't respond to it just makes this card so difficult to deal with. However, as long as Super Poly remains at 3, I think that this is a card that is going to be used in any extra deck that's running Super Poly. If this card ever does drop to below $2, I will be buying a ton of copies, since barring some sort of random reprint that just tanks this card's value, this card definitely feels like something that is going to appreciate in value over time. Alright, now this is an interesting tech card that saw varying amounts of play. It's Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon. So initially this card was pretty hyped up. It's essentially a Book of Eclipse that can also potentially double as a board wipe against certain strategies, but as a trap card it's naturally a lot slower than a lot of other cards that you could be running. However, this card did see a bit of play over the last couple of formats. Players like Ryan Yu maxed out on this card at 3 in certain Labyrinth builds to disrupt Kashtira, while other decks like Dragon Link teched this card as a one-of that could be searched out of the deck with triple Tactics Thrust, giving you a strong, reliable disruption just in case you get hit with Dark Ruler no more. Now initially, Karma Cannon was kind of written off, but it did go up in price over time as players realized how valuable the card was, and honestly I could see the same thing happening with this card once again once it gets its Megaton reprint. It can be really easy to overlook this card because it is a trap and it's a bit slower, but when you really read and understand just how powerful Karma Cannon's effect actually is, you kind of look back at it and wonder why it was so cheap in the first place. The pre-sale for this card is currently at $2 on TCG Player. My gut's kind of telling me that you will be able to grab this card for $1 once the tins are mass opened, because there's so many players that are going to be overlooking this card. So hold off for just a little bit and wait to pick it up once it drops a little bit more. But at that point, this card is just way too powerful and has too much potential to just be a $1 or $1.50 card. So I would look to pick up multiple copies at that point if you can. Okay, now, I don't know if you want to consider this card a bit of a riskier pick on this list, but to me, it seems like a no-brainer to keep an eye on Bystial Druisworm. I think everyone is expecting the Bystial engine to be hit in some sort of way this ban list. Different prediction lists hit it in different ways, with limits to Lubellion and Magnamut being the most common hits. However, there are some prediction lists that I've seen that seem to think we will mirror the OCG, and that involves having Druisworm limited to 1 in addition to Magnamut. Now to that end, I do understand why some players would be wary of looking at Druisworm, but if you guys saw my prediction list, you'll know that I personally feel like Druisworm is not going to get hit. In fact, I think that players will turn to Druisworm as sort of a Magnamut replacement. Right now, a lot of players are running a package of 3 Magnamut with 1 Druisworm, since the cards are still extremely valuable hand traps that can be really disruptive against certain strategies. I think that if we see Magnamut go to 1, then you would basically just run 1 Magnamut and 3 Druisworm and you basically have almost the exact same package. So for right now, Druisworm pre-orders are $2. This is for the Prismatic Secret Rare printing, guys, which feels just way too cheap, but if Magnamut does get limited, then I think this card will instantly jump up to like $5 a piece. Let me know what you guys think about this card. Personally, this is one of the cards I am going to be hunting for a ton of once the tins do come out. And finally, guys, I know I'm showing Exo Sister Martha here, but what I'm really suggesting is the Exo Sister cards from the Megatins in general. Now, the Megatins, we have a ton of Exo Sister cards that are getting secret rare upgrades, and they do look really, really nice. It was a good choice by Konami, especially considering that they are waifu cards. Honestly, I don't see the deck going anywhere. They'll probably lose Dimension Shifter this list, but aside from that, the deck is actually pretty reasonable and probably underpowered. However, we want to keep in mind that a lot of new players joining the game will probably look and say that they want to jump on Exo Sisters as their deck of choice at some point down the road. Now, on the flip side of that, I foresee a lot of people being really disappointed by their Exo Sister pulls. There's so many Exo Sister cards being included as secret rares in the tins. I can already see myself getting upset that I pulled like an Elise instead of a Fenrir or a Druisworm or something infinitely more useful. Now, that being said, you will definitely have times at your locals where you'll be able to pick up Exo Sister cards for extremely cheap. If they're just taking up space in people's binders, you should be able to grab a really nice looking secret rare upgrade of one of the Exo Sister monsters for like 25 or 50 cents. You'd probably end up getting like 2 or 3 of them for $1 even. Over time, I do think that these will be a good investment if you're okay with sitting on them for a couple of years. You'll have to wait for a new player to join the game and be interested in them, and then you can move the entire core all at once, or maybe the cards will get some random new support, but I think that a meta-viable waifu deck is definitely something that's going to get attention from players eventually. It's just a matter of when. Alright guys, those are my thoughts on the tins so far. I mean, we do also have the promos to pay attention to. It is unfortunate that there's still only the 1 promo per tin. I think the promos are actually going to do some pretty hard carrying. The pre-order prices do look a little bit higher than I thought they'd be. Depending on what you can pick them up at, I think they might be okay to grab since they are quarter century rare printings. They might be worth grabbing if you can grab enough of them at a good price. But anyways, that is all for today's Market Watch. Please make sure that you hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and do make sure that you check out MSTmerch.com because the summer sale is still going on and you guys should definitely grab some pink sleeves before the sale is over. Until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.